Hey everyone, it's Justin here, Voices for Voices. Thank you so much for joining, whether you're watching or listening, whether you're here in the United States or a country abroad, across over 110 countries, territories, and provinces, and over 1,100 cities across the world. Thank you for joining us on this episode. We are well over 455 episodes in the Voices for Voices catalog. If you can do us a big favor, give us a big thumbs up, like, follow, subscribe, share to our Voices for Voices TV show and podcast episodes. And if you could reach out to maybe 25 of your contacts in your phone and let them know about Voices for Voices and the huge impact that we want to help at least 3 billion people over the course of my lifetime and beyond. Without you, we don't have a show. So thank you for the demand. Thank you for requesting more content. And that is what we are delivering on. We're going to talk about a couple different topics today. And the first one is one thing I get asked is why so many episodes? Like, why, why, why so many episodes? And at first, when I was being asked, a year or so ago, I really didn't have a great answer. I, 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 I really didn't. The more I thought about it, though, and have thought about it since then and now, is one of the areas is having the mental illnesses that I do have. I I want to be a spark of energy of lowering that stigma of look what somebody with mental illnesses can do. And no matter how hard, how tough, how easy some of the days may be, I have to lead by example. And by doing that, a byproduct of that are the shows. And so that's the biggest reason is not to say, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me like that. It's the look at what somebody can do when it looks like all odds are stacked against him, against his organization. And so that answer that it is that I just shared is a big part of why so many episodes. Number one, we know our time is limited, right? We know our time's limited on Earth. Uh, and then that second part that I just covered of look at what someone like me can do with very little money, very little budget, if any, just enough to be able to get the shows out. And so if I can do it, you can do it. Maybe podcasting, maybe TV shows, maybe that's something that's not for you. Maybe it's something else. And so let us, all of us in the world, not just me, not just Voices for Voices, let us all be a light in a world that at sometimes is a dark place. where people aren't nice. People are hurting others. And all it takes is one. All it takes is one of us. So if I can do it, you can do it. I don't claim to be the best. I don't claim that, yeah, I don't claim that we're the best. I mean, when I talk about being third behind the Joe Rogan Experience and the Dan Bongino show, those are just stats that bear that, bring, those numbers out. But other than that, we're just coming to you bringing real topics, transparency. We're bringing easy topics. We're bringing hard topics. We're bringing topics that, again, I say this over and over again, but it's so true. So many organizations are doing such great work. However, they're not covering the hard topics. I'll give you an example. So, one of our past guests that you have seen thus far, Marilyn Reichel from Seattle, Washington, here in the United States. And it just so happens that that's where she lives. Uh, Not saying Seattle is, that this special place. It's just where she's from, where she lives. And I have for a long time tried to no avail. So in a way, I failed to find someone or someone's to come on the show and talk about caring for individuals who are a little bit uh, more mature age-wise. So they've 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 lived a lot of years. And so I've tried to find assisted living facilities, individuals to talk about just that, what it's like treating people with dignity, respect, when it can seem like, well, these individuals are at the end of their lives. They don't have many years to live. And so when we had Marilyn Reichel on, and she talked about growing up in a home that didn't say the word love, the Calvinist culture heavily in her family. And so the thought was, well, almost like we were going to cast away people when they get older, like they're some type of a commodity. And that's just not the case. And so you heard and saw in that episode where both of us were talking about experience. And Sarah Dog Lucy here taking a snooze. Um, and Marilyn admitted that she wasn't the caregiver type of a person. Didn't think she could do it. Same thing for me with my dad. And so she talked just through this situation. She talked about doing art with her mom. She talked about giving like shoulder neck massages to people that she wasn't even related to, but she was given dignity and respect to these individuals, especially her mom and her dad, mother and father. And so by the fact that up until now, it's taken over 450 episodes to talk to somebody. And I don't believe she's a registered nurse or doctor, nurse practitioner. I don't think she is. And so she was just doing it as a human, as she says, and said, just being a human, not somebody that, well, they have dementia or Alzheimer's or, they're not gonna, not gonna remember or forgetting. But she learned how to be a caregiver to the best of her ability. See if I can get a little bit more light here. This is kind of bothering me for those watching. Um, this the video is coming in a little bit dark for this episode, so like shadowy, not dark. In other words, it's shadowy, and it was so moving, so touching when she was sharing. I mean, I was in awe of that because I remember going into assisted living facility for my grandparents. Some of them, some of the people living there at that time, some of their families visited, and some of them didn't. Some of them may have had family that were a long ways away. Some were just busy. Some were just trying to almost like numb the pain. And I don't know this to be true, but I know from my experience, that maybe they were numbing the pain with alcohol and drugs and things like that, or finding things to do, or moving away because it was hard to see. Just because we weren't able to have a conversation that somebody younger, earlier in their years, that could have. And I shared as well with my grandparents that, and even with my dad, that we didn't have to say, sometimes we didn't have to say a whole lot, but just knowing someone else is in that room with you, with me, is enough. We don't have to be in full-blown conversation mode to feel comfort. And I know from example, for me, when when I was discharged from the hospital in 2017 and I was at home, I I was afraid for myself. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was trying to recover, and there were days that were scarier than others. And I remember asking my dad literally first to take me to my therapy. And the first therapy group sessions that I went to was at a hospital that I was discharged from. And so it was that step down. And it was, mhm, I think it was to 8 to 2 or 9 to 2. Anyways, there were several hours plus an over half-hour drive for my dad. And this therapy was, I think it was like 4 days a week. And I was afraid of driving. That was one of the things that came with me at that point. I was afraid. And so I had my dad come pick me up, take me to therapy. Sometimes he would go to the mall and walk, get some exercise, and then he would be in the lobby waiting for me after the therapy. And he was doing probably what I would have done too, is, taking a little bit of a snooze. But the fact that he did that on his own, he wasn't being compensated for it. He didn't have to do it. We didn't say a whole lot of words, a whole lot of conversation. But that was me in my 30s. So when the roles were reversed at the end of life for my dad, a lot of the time was just sitting in the same room together. I didn't know what was going through his mind. I had no clue. I knew he knew the diagnosis, but sitting with him for an hour or two or three was the least I could do as a human being and as a son. And that example I just shared about that therapy right out once I was discharged from the hospital, that was just one instance of the time that my dad did something like that. Like I remember, so I'm 44, okay? And I was turned 40. And when I was younger, not a whole lot of people know this. I have shared it on at least one show. But when I was younger, in my teens, I didn't foresee myself becoming 40 years old. Like for some reason, I didn't want to grow old, have gray hair, just, those types of things were going through my head at such an early age. And and so it got very real when I got out of the hospital. And as I was getting closer to my birthday, I had no plans to do anything negatively to my body. Uh, n- Nothing like that. But I was just still just like still afraid because years ago that was the thought that went through my mind. And so with, kind of starting from the ground up in 2017, I called and I asked my dad, and it wasn't a therapy day. I just said, "Hey," and I wasn't able to process television very well. Like I would get dizzy watching the television. So I found my favorite chair, my favorite spot, I guess, which I learned through therapy and things that happens where people at times find a comfort zone, a comfort space to sit or to be in or around. Just like I had a comfort zone when my dad was around, because I knew if anything happened, he'd be able to help take care of it for me. And he's ultimately who dialed 911, had the ambulance come, take me to the hospital, to get that hospital stay started, where I decided it was time for me to have my mental health evaluated, checked out. And so I asked my dad if he would come up. I didn't say I had negative thought. I just said on my actual birthday it was a weekday. I said, "Hey, can you just come and just sit with me?" That's what I said. And he did. He drove all the way up. He just sat there. TV was, like I said, barely on because I was getting dizzy watching. And so I know my dad's in heaven, but I just want to say thank you again to my dad, for all he did, all he sacrificed, all throughout my life. And I remember even with the shadows, and we're getting emotional, that right, sometimes we don't say, as a conversation with Marilyn in the previous episode, when she was talking about, we are talking about like saying, how we love our, family, our parents, and that. And throughout my life, I didn't really say I love you a lot to my parents. I don't know why. I think I thought I was just too, not even too cool, just like, well, they're always going to be there, and I don't need to, even though they would say. And so towards the end of my dad's life here on Earth, we were starting to say that we loved each other, because one of my biggest regrets was for my grandparents that I wasn't there on their, end of their days. Before my dad had passed, my grandma passed the week of my wedding. And I was dealing with just, I hadn't taken care of my mental health. And so I was just succumbed basically by the anxiety. I knew she was in not a, not a great state. And the Wednesday before my wedding on Saturday, my grandma passed. And because my anxiety was so much for the wedding and that I had just things build up for years and years and years, I I didn't know if I'd be able to handle it. And so I didn't go to that facility, and that was a regret. And then my other grandma and grandpa was a little bit younger, and I really never had a chance, in my opinion, to say that I love them, like to them, not just to my parents and say, tell grandma I love her and tell grandpa or and I I regret all that. So the one thing that of many things, sorry, I have tears coming down if you're watching, but sometimes I'm like, put them away. So when my dad was, you know, his, as all of our days are limited on Earth, as his were getting more and more limited, we got to say, I love you, before I would leave. He wanted to stay at the house. We wanted him to stay at the house and not be in a facility. Um, so we started to say, love you. Should have said it many more years sooner, but I didn't. And so that was a huge regret. The difference in this time was he was still at this point that I'm referring to. He had understood the diagnosis, and so we may have sat for an hour or two, and I remember my dad said, you know, saying to me, that we didn't have to talk a whole lot, that just being in the same room and just sitting there, like I just mentioned earlier, that that was just kind of what we did. Like I was telling Marilyn on our previous episode and telling others at public events and such that, we could watch a ball game for 2, 3 hours and we may only say five, six, seven, 8 words the whole the whole time. And most of the words were at the game, saying something to the players like, come on, like, why couldn't you make that catch? Or why couldn't you hit the ball or whatever that may be? So when we were saying, we loved each other, uh, I felt a little bit of a weight lifted off me because I at least got to tell him once. I got to tell him more than once, but I was able to tell him at least one time that he understood and he said it back and then he said it and then it just became kind of a standard that we would do once we once we kind of got the diagnosis, it was like, well, tomorrow could be the day, today could be the day that God takes him. And so we decided. And the one thing that I thought, in addition to the I love you, is so I would say I love you. He would say, I love you, Justin. Man, it's difficult. He would say, I love you. And then he would say, ever since the beginning, I've loved you ever since the beginning. Basically, my understanding of that is since I was born, or since my mom was pregnant with me, when he said, I love you, and I loved you from the beginning. And he said it over and over again, and it never got old. Never. And so I'm not doing this for pity. I'm not doing this so anybody feels bad for me. But that's part of the drive I have with Voices for Voices is we don't know when our last day is going to be on Earth. Some may know somewhat of a time frame. Some of it can be sudden. And so to go through what I went through to hear Marilyn, that's why that conversation with her was so, it was just so refreshing to hear. Like I said, I've been waiting years to talk to somebody, a caregiver. We've had doctors and we've had rabbis and priests. We've had, politicians on both sides of the aisle. We've had quite a variety. But having Marilyn on and have her talk about her caring for her parents and to not treat them as like not human, that well, their life's over because they have dementia or Alzheimer's or cancer or whatever that may be. Uh, so cherish the time you have with people. Not everybody's gonna, we're not gonna get along with everybody. There's gonna be tough decisions we have to make. We've made a lot of tough decisions here as of late as an organization. Right? We're not going to be able to share those right now. They will probably, maybe some point, find their way out into the public. But when I'm asked about why so many episodes, why the drive, it's because I want to help people, no matter what situation they're in. Everything could be going great, and that's awesome. I hope for everybody. that that can be possible. But I just want to be a light for everyone that comes in contact with Voices for Voices and our Voices for Voices TV show and podcast, and with me, Justin Allen Hayes. And so thank you to Marilyn. Thank you to all of our guests we've had on thus far, our solo episodes. Just thank you for being a part of the Voices for Voices movement of helping people having, that mental health, that trauma recovery, that just helping spirit as part of ourselves. Just thank you for tuning in. Thank you for giving us thumbs up, liking, follow, subscribing, sharing, reaching out to 25 contacts in your phone, 50, 100, your social media, following our Voices for Voices social media, following our profiles. It's for everybody. So thank you for joining us on this episode. Again, we have over 450 episodes in our catalog. And thank you for making Voices for Voices what it is, what it has been, and what it will be in the future. Let's celebrate the voices of all of us, and let's be a voice for not only ourselves, but those maybe at the end of life that aren't able to be voices for themselves, that we can still treat them no matter what stage of life they're in, treat them with dignity, whether they're a newborn or whether their days are numbered. All of our days are numbered. Only God knows that. But from a human perspective, just treat people with the dignity and love and support that we want to be treated with when it comes our turn, because we're not going to get out of this alive, unfortunately. And so we're sending a lot of love and support to you, whether you're a believer or not. We're sending good vibes your way. So we'll see you on the next episode of the Voices for Voices TV show and podcast. I've been your host, Justin Allen Hayes, and we're signing off on this episode. Bye bye for now.